Very neat. Welcome back to Tarot Together. And this video is my attributes regarding the Fool card. The prior video on this, the gathering of the attributes, the determination of the attributes, tells you how I arrived at this place. Just so you know how I got here, if you are developing your way of studying the tarot. And in that video, I made it clear to you that these are my ways of categorizing the information I've collected and what the card has come to mean to me. And they will change and grow over time. That's the whole purpose of the tarot to me. Change and evolution and transformation. So here are the categories I have divided my insight into the Fool's card. Innocence, beginning and beginning again. The journey, change, acceptance, the Godhead, and spiritual evolution, and the fringe, experience. That condenses down the power of the card for me. Oh, it'll change over time. That's what it is in the moment. So I thought I'd share each of those categories with you so you understand how I arrived at them. And when I mention the attributes I see in the card, you might have the same in your relationship with the card. It could inspire you to think differently about your card. It might even be that it inspires you to think differently because you either agree with what I'm saying or your experience of the card has not been so. We learn in both ways. So this category of innocence, here's the attributes I've ascribed to that. And I do have notes in front of me that I'll be looking towards. Otherwise I just leave things out or I wander too much. Innocence could also be considered optimism. Absolute trust, the power of faith, not needing to question or have proof, just to go with it. The feeling of being carefree, absolute freedom in life. Confidence, no fear of the future, no considering in the moment consequences. It's just about doing. The innocence and the power of curiosity. The lack of passing of judgment. Fool doesn't care who's told him what in the past or what they might say in the future. But there's also the power of lack of self-judgment. The Fool carries on without judging itself either. Ecstasy. This innocent, optimistic category in my attributes for the Fool include ecstasy as the complete abandon, the giving over to life and to living, which aligns it to the power of exuberance, just going for it. It's about, perhaps, hope. If the Fool is not dancing blindly at the edge of the cliff, if he's there as an act of faith, he has a lot of faith in the future. It's the lesson that's about the journey and not the destination, because he does seem to be frozen in time. We don't know where he's come from. We don't know where he's going next. It's just the power of movement. The whole card is about movement. Joy. The absolute joy in the moment. About living in the moment, therefore fully experiencing life. We know that the Fool carries the past in his wallet, if that's how we accept the mysterious contents in his wallet. He's not without connection to the past or the future, but he is fully living the moment. He doesn't seem to have any responsibilities. He's alone, in the sense that any decision he makes, he's making on behalf of himself. He feels no need to conform because, as he is not judging himself or others, he's also not listening to others. Maybe because he's oblivious to them, but just as much because he knows your opinions aren't needed at this point in my life. He is pure. The tabula rasa. His life isn't written yet. Oh, even if it's about an evolution that he's lived before and he's being born again, he's still starting all over with a clean slate. It's the power of the simple, the unaffected, the uncomplicated. It's also the power of spontaneity. I don't know that he planned carefully to get where he is. I need him not to have done that, actually, in my relationship to him. It's going with a moment. I get the feeling that this innocence and optimism, this category I have named, this particular gathering of words and phrases, has to do with instinct and intuition and just listening to the voice within. Of course, the depth to that, the Fool card, is that involvement of the spiritual sun. Where's that whisper coming from? But the Fool doesn't worry about that. He just goes with it. And the last attribute I have for this category of innocence and optimism is wonder. The feeling of joy and abandon. Getting the absolute out of the moment, each moment of living. Aligned to curiosity, the power of wonder. That are my attributes for this category of innocence and optimism. Let's talk for a moment about reversals. Reversals to me, which I've mentioned in an earlier video, aren't negative. They are an intimate part of the wisdom of each of the cards. We learn through the opposites, the balance, the pendulum swing of what each card can mean. Either because they teach us in the moment that we have not enough or too much of the energy of that card in our lives, or often things are happening out of time and alignment that have to do with the card. So I collect reversals. I don't collect reversals. I don't make note of them by jotting them down in that freeform exercise I told you about. I don't collect other people's reversals. To me, the concept of reversals, the balance, the complete picture to the card, come out of your personal understanding of what the card means. So when I have gotten to the point that I've categorized a particular category when it comes to my research and where it took me, my experience of the card and where it took me. For instance, in this case, the attributes I just shared for innocence and optimism. I look at each of those and I spend time on to think, what if there wasn't enough of that in the Fool's life, in my life? What if there was an excess of that? Or what if it was present but not at a time complementary to the wider picture of what's happening in my life? That's how I then write my reversals. So, the following list, my reversals, it's the pendulum swing and the balance to all those things I just listed for innocence and optimism. They're all powerful lessons in their own right. When the Fool points out to us, especially in relation to the other cards around it in a spread, you've got too much curiosity and not enough connection to the reality of life around you. There's nothing negative about that. It's a deepening of the wisdom of the card. Here are my reversals for the Fool card. If it's about joy in life, dancing at the edge, not enough of that. Apathy, being too solemn. Instead of being present to the moment of life, being absent from life, letting life happen without our intimate involvement in it. If in the attributes is the power of being alone, the solitary sojourner, there's also falling into the habit of being so solitary that we can't take responsibility for ourselves in the sense of understanding the lessons of our past and our power to influence our future. There's also the fact that we might not be taking responsibility for others because we've separated ourselves. If the power of the attributes is instinct and intuition, if they're not balanced, if there's not enough of that, we don't trust our instinct or our intuition. If the card is about being fearless, if the card is not at its most powerful, we may be fear-driven. Another form, perhaps, of apathy. If the aspect of freedom in the card is not wanting or needing the judgment of others, out of balance, that's the need to conform to the expectation of others. And when it comes to whether we acknowledge, encourage, or relate to judgment, even assistance, support of others, if that's out of balance because the Fool is busy being so independent, well then his relationship with others is not healthy. Therefore, he could actually misplace his trust and become gullible. Innocence sometimes falls into that trap. And if it's all about freedom, it can also be about impulse. Inconsiderate actions without thinking about consequences. Rash actions with no forethought and no consideration of self or others. If the energy of independence is not balanced, the Fool himself can become judgmental of himself as well as others. The pendulum swing to that absolute freedom that he represents, out of balance, becomes making life more complicated than it needs to be. Having the need to plan every single action. And then dancing at the edge, fully involved in self, there is the possibility of being oblivious as life passes by. That chalice moment in the story of the Grail. The Grail passes right in front of the Fool and he doesn't see it. He's oblivious to it. If he's constantly in motion, is he stopping then to smell the roses, to experience life? It could become a frenetic energy. The pendulum swing to being joyful, giving over to ecstasy and experience. If there's a lack of that in a reversal, the Fool's being too serious to experience life. He's suspicious of those around him. He's worried about the future. He feels burdened by the past. Imagine the staff, that the wallet at the end of it gets heavier and heavier and weighs him down and slows him down, and there's no more dancing feet. That's the power of the balance within the card. And if he is journeying for the sake of journeying, it could also be at an extreme that with no sense of direction, no sense of purpose, there's no relationship to the future, he's lost. Physically lost, spiritually lost. So, I'm calling them reversals because traditionally they are called reversals, but they all come out of my experience of the attributes of the card. And therefore, what happens if those attributes which I collect, which are positive and life-affirming and wisdom, the wisdom of others and the wisdom of myself as I relate to the card, become the Fool indeed in my life? Those images allow us to consider what he teaches us, if he's too much or not enough of the Fool. Or even if the Fool is the perfect thing to be, the perfect aspiration, is it always that? That's how I look at reversals. They come out of my attributes. I don't collect them as bits and pieces formalized in my studies that I've seen from others. My attributes are often influenced by things I read, but the reversals, the pendulum swing, the equivalence that is part of the study of the tarot. Balanced meanings that can be important equally in their own right or become important when you bring them together for a resolution, a centering, a possibility for growth and change. That's the depth and the power of attributes. This has been my thoughts on a category for the Fool card entitled Innocence. It'd be great if you'd like to share your thoughts on what you see of that in the card and what the consequences are of not enough wonder in your living. What are the consequences of too much freedom and independence in living? And where is the appropriate time to be the Fool in the living of your life? I'd welcome your thoughts on this in the comments below. And if you're participating in our Facebook group, and the following page will link you to that. Mary Part.